Okay. Well, we've got looks like 13 attendees, so that's it's about 25%, I think. Aaron is here. I am here. We'll do introductions for ourselves really quick.
I'm Aaron. This is Mick, and that's Tactical Zep. I'm Aaron.
Yep. All right. So Tactical Zep
going so well.
Based on structurally, this is sort of based on our tactical burp, which we've also done. I actually never have, and I don't think Aaron has either.
I've not taught it, but I've watched it several times now.
But so Kevin has done that. Kevin has done that with Jason. Kevin has done that with Nathan. I think last year at Wild West Hacking Fest, and it continues to be popular. And so this is the Zap variant. So different tool that sort of fills the same role in your tool chain, or really does fill the same role in your tool chain
for free.
Yeah.
And open source. And that's why we're doing this, because we like it. And also I'm teaching a workshop here in about a week in Denver at Snowfrock. So if anybody's there, register for Snowfrock and come see me in person.
And then if you have problems with your virtualization, Aaron actually has to come around to the table and help you.
Yeah, I can grab somebody else to come help you. Or I could try to fix it myself. I don't know. We can see.
Okay.
You want to go to the next slide?
I'm trying. I haven't done this in a long time, to be honest. Well, did we go too far? No, we didn't go too far. I'm going back to that.
No, you're the next one.
Yeah, I thought I put myself after you. Did you switch that around?
You did. I put you before me, though, on purpose, because you're the primary here giving this talk right now, and I'm along for the ride.
It kind of seems like nobody's giving this talk right now.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, so I'm Mick Whitehorn. Obviously, we don't take ourselves too incredibly seriously here, but we will get down to business and cover this content. I'm a security consultant with Secure Ideas, been here since 2016. And I was a dev for a long time before that. And my current role at Secure Ideas kind of walks the line between wearing both of those hats as well. So I handle some of our internal tooling in addition to doing consulting still. Sometimes I'm an open source contributor, not always. I would say that there was definitely a period of time where I went through doing open source. Everything I did, I open sourced, and that was great. And then people started building commercial products based on training off of open source software and trying to put developers out of work. So I'm not sure anymore. Might have skewed a little too political on that one. Okay. Also, in my free time, I sort of see them behind me. I build and mod electric guitars quite a bit.
I'm Aaron Moss, senior consultant. Take two. I'm Aaron Moss, senior consultant for Secure Ideas. I've been here for just under a year, literally, like I think in 6 days is my 1 year anniversary. And I've loved it. It's great. Before this, I was at a place called True Digital Security for about 5 years. I've been doing PenTesting for 6 now. I've been a network admin and virtual admin and all network admin, all that stuff like that, help desk, and just kind of worked my way through the ranks and to get to this point. I'm a deconstructed Christian. I love Jesus. And I also love horror movies. That's actually me right there in the Jason costume with the axe. So huge metalhead, big headbanger, was actually psyching myself up with some Cannibal Corpse before we started this webcast because, quite frankly, I was nervous because I didn't get sleep last night. And so, yeah. You can find me on the Twitter at Hot Doggity, and you can email me at aaron.moss@securideas.com. One thing I forgot to mention, I guess, is I am one of the founders and organizers of B-Sides OK with my boss, Nathan Sweeney, here in Tulsa. So if there's anybody around the Tulsa area that you're headed this direction in early April, come see us at B-Sides. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I've been down to that conference before. It's I think, possibly the best B-Sides I've been to, and I've been to some good ones. So,
Don't tell that to Nathan. You'll give him a big head.
Yeah, it's a little late for that now. All right, let's press on. Okay. Yes.
So who is Secure Ideas, right? I'll do this and I'll let you do the technical. How about that?
Appreciate that.
Yep. Who is Secure Ideas? Basically, what it boils down to is we're really a penetration testing company, but we handle all sorts of security stuff, right? We're looking at, you can see here, pen testing, advisory services, security training, hybrid assessments for risk assessments or arch reviews, stuff like that. Generally speaking, we do all kinds of security consulting, code reviews, anything that fits in that area, we can help you take care of. We've been doing this for since 2010, right? 2009. I mean, as a company, like Kevin started the company, and
yes,
it was founded in 2010, I think.
Yeah, because 2020 was supposed to be the 10th anniversary. I mean, it was, but we didn't end up doing what we were going to do for the 10th anniversary because the world shut down.
I heard about that. Yeah. And basically what it boils down to is if anybody needs any help with any kind of security consulting whatsoever, we have the tools, we have the talent. And yes, that's a Ghostbusters reference.
All right. Okay.
Yeah, we're professionally evil. That means that I put this meme in there because I just love this picture. Who doesn't love a cat inside of a computer? Go on.
I mean, it's your computer. Yeah.
We are professionally evil. That's the slogan. But basically what it boils down to is we think how do I put this? We get paid to be bad guys.
Well,
right?
We get paid to think like bad guys.
We get paid to think like bad guys, to be bad guys, but not do all the stuff that bad guys do, like completely destroy things. We just try to get in and maneuver around and do some of the things that the bad guys do so that we can help you understand where they're going to attack, how they're going to attack, and what you need to do to fix that. That's the idea. Is we're always trying to help people improve. Everything we do is always under contract. It's always 100% like scoped out, legal. We don't do anything without having prior permission. And we also, our mission statement is to provide the best possible pen test experience you ever will have.
I like to sort of summarize by saying we're like Alan Rickman. Right. So Alan Rickman's an actor, right? Alan Rickman has played
so many great
villains
roles,
right? I don't want to use the past tense, Eric. The body of work is still there.
He lives on through his work. Yes,
body of work is still there. Played these fantastic villains, right, over the years, and did it convincingly, and did an excellent job with that. And who can forget Snape? By all accounts, he was a professional on set. He was excellent to work with, and that's the other side of it, right?
Right.
If you're really good at playing villains, but you're horrible on set and nobody wants to work with you, Jared Leto, then you'll probably stop getting hired for it.
Throwing shade. I also liken it to Freddy Krueger, Robert Englund, who is an amazing person. I've met him, and yeah, he's really super cool, but he also plays one heck of a bad guy. Go on.
All right.
I left the slide in there because I wanted to talk about this real quick. So why penetration testing, or why web pen testing? Because there's several thousand web applications out there, right? The entire world runs on web apps. And so whenever we're testing for flaws in these different applications, it helps us secure the overall the overall infrastructure, right? And by doing that, it will make us whole. Make us whole, Isaac. Make us whole.
Okay. Yeah. So,
I forgot to insert a Dead Space reference in there. Come on.
Okay. All right. So yeah, you've got.
I can't click forward.
All these web apps. They're internal web apps, of course, but a lot of web apps are out there intentionally on your public attack surface, and securing them is important.
Right. If we can break in through the web app and everything, we may be able to get to your underlying infrastructure. And this is one of the things that brings us to the OWASP Top 10. This is updated for 2021. The previous slides that we've had were for 2017. They've done some updates, and it used to be new, but I mean, let's face it, we're now going into 2023, so these aren't necessarily new anymore, right? Broken access control, many of these were there before. They've just been clustered together, like security misconfigurations, vulnerable and outdated components, identification and authentication failures, stuff like that, right?
Yeah.
There are some new ones, though. I think injection was number one before, if I'm not mistaken. And it's moved down now because broken access control is a huge factor, specifically in APIs, right, Mick?
Yeah, I mean, it's one of the big concerns with APIs. I think it probably wasn't detected as often as it should have been in web apps in the past. And I think part of that was in the past.
Mick for a second.
No. From my perspective, we lost you.
Oh.
So, yeah. In the
APIs.
Past, so in the past, OWASP used a lot of data from a large scanning vendor, and I think so. The scanner's ability to detect types of flaws has impacted at times where they rank on the list. Automated scanners have in the past generally struggled with access control issues in a lot of cases. So
now they've done it with polls, correct? Like they actually polled people for what they've saw, kind of like the Verizon DBIR.
They were doing some of that before too. It's just in the scope of their data set, like 80% of the data set I'm trying to remember, was it the 2018, I think? I don't even know if that's the right year, but around that time, revision of the OWASP top 10, there was like 80% of the data set came from a single scanning vendor. So
wow. So one of the things cryptographic failures, we're definitely going to see. I don't know that we're going to see that today. We'll probably see some injection. We're definitely going to see some security misconfiguration. Potentially some outdated components. I know there's going to be definitely vulnerable components and authentication failures and stuff like that. So obviously we're not going to look at any logging or monitoring today or anything like that, because this is a lab environment that doesn't have that kind of stuff set up. So, but we're going to be looking at several of these today and figuring out how Zap can help you find some of these flaws as well.
Yeah, we will. The focus will be less on how to test for this specific flaw or that specific flaw, more how to use the tool in your workflow. So,
right.
Well, we'll look at several examples of flaws. We're not going to go, into like a deep dive into how to exploit cross-site scripting or how to actually make a clickjacking proof of concept work or things like that. Okay. Here we've got sort of you want to take this, Aaron? Or you want me to?
Yeah. So basically, this right here, we're just going to go over these different. So we're going to, how do I say this? The automation comes in whenever we're doing specific scans and stuff like that, like automated scans through Zap and stuff. We're not necessarily going to be comparing these to Burp, although Burp is probably what we use most often. We're definitely more familiar with Burp than we are with Zap to a degree, but we are going to go over some of the ways that you can use these scanning and everything to find the different flaws in for fuzzing. And if you're not familiar with fuzzing, basically that's just throwing random data into an input to see what comes back out of it, right? You're looking to see if you can cause any errors or if it causes any weird kind of anything to come back odd that you weren't expecting or that the app wasn't expecting. Injection flaws, of course, is for like code flaws. If we're able to inject JavaScript or HTML or whatever else into something, which also lines up with traditional cross-site scripting. Sensitive info exposure, if there's any kind of, this goes back almost to like the broken access controls, right? This is where you can access stuff that you shouldn't be able to access stuff because of, let's go over to authorization flaws, right? If you're unauthorized, but you can still see some stuff, well, now you have potential sensitive access exposure, info exposure, and stuff like that. Manually speaking, you're looking for authentication flaws and everything. So can we get around certain in authorization? DOM-based XSS, that's looking more, of course, along the lines of, can we manipulate the document object model itself within the application through JavaScript and cause some issues there? CSRF, can we cause somebody else to do something by using a cross-site scripting type vulnerability, logic flaws, stuff like that? We're not necessarily going to go over a lot of these today, but we want you to be aware that these are what Zap is primarily used for from a pen testing perspective. This is how we use Zap. I'm sure other developers and everything use Zap and Burp from the perspective of just testing the actual applications themselves to make sure that everything flows correctly. Hey, does this go where it's supposed to go, etc. And I know Mick can speak well more to that than I can. That's just my limited exposure.
Yeah. So I mean, there are builds of Zap that are, if, for example, a containerized one that's intended to run as part of your CI tool chain, where you load your configuration into it and run an automated scan during the CI process. For example, that's first of all complex to do. Second of all, well outside of my experience with Zap. So we're not touching setting up a CI toolchain with it today. But we'll look more at the manual side and driving the scanners yourself as well. So with that in mind, I'm going to take away the slides, and then I'm going to pull up the lab environment.
Go for it.
And we will go from there.
I'm glad you're running this, because my Samurai, for whatever reason, all of a sudden, just in the last hour, as I was getting everything set up, decided it just wanted to start rebooting itself every 5 minutes. Not just like locking, but rebooting.
Don't jinx it, Aaron. Because I don't know what mine is doing at this point. Oh, I know it's a screensaver right now. See? It's not as bad as it looked, is it? All right. I got myself set up already. So, and then I promptly clicked the other window header and put something in front of it. All right. So here it is. You can probably see some of the slide around it, possibly, maybe not. Okay, and you can see the pop-up in front here. So I've launched Zap. One of the first questions it has asked me is, do I want to persist my Zap session? Do I want to save stuff? Do I want to be able to pick this up and work on it some more later, or reference it when I'm writing the report? And normally, if I were conducting a test, the answer would definitely be one of the yeses. Today, I'm going to choose no, because I'm living dangerously. We're doing live demos anyway.
Why be able the demo guys that this works?
Why be able to restore the project? What you may not have seen there, I'll show you in the menu. Actually, is my proxy is listening on port 8081. It looks at 8080 by default. In my case, 8080 was busy at the time because I had an older version of Zap running. So when I launched this one, it took 8081 instead. So that's a difference. And when we start doing the proxy setup stuff, we'll see that you may be wanting to do 8080 instead of 8081 if you're following along. Yeah.
Either way works. 8080 is basically kind of the default port for a lot of proxies to go through. Burp sets it up automatically. This actually, Zap sets it up automatically by that. And, that's basically kind of, it's kind of the de facto standard. It's real easy to know that we're going to go to that. So,
as a developer, it's usually not that straightforward for me. I often have many things wanting to share the same ports and failing over to different ports, and I try to keep all that in my head, which is interesting. So,
Oh, wow.
yeah, occasionally I end up in the wrong place when I navigate.
Well, that's why I use Foxy Proxy, but even Foxy Proxy was giving me problems a while ago with this, so I don't know.
And we will we'll set that up actually in a bit here before too long. So, just although it's not important as an action item at this point, I'm going to get myself back to the screen that I'm on here. I'm going to click my way out of those options. I'm going to cancel that. All right, so I used, and it's probably a little small on the shared screen, I've got a gear icon here. I hover over it, I get the options tooltip. In my case, it's right below tools. And if I scroll down, I think I had to expand this. There's an item there called network that has local proxies, local servers and proxies there. And this is the main proxy is what do I want Zap to listen on? Now, so I'm thinking here. There's a bit I wanted to hit on before we got here, and I didn't. So what does it do?
Yeah, that's a good question.
What is Zap for, right? I think most people here probably have a pretty good idea, but I still want to go over it very quickly. In this case, we're going to go over it while it's sitting in front of you. So the interception proxy, right? That's the role it plays in the tool chain. It's the same role that burp plays in the tool chain. If I accidentally call Zap burp over the course of this webinar, that's because burp is what I have normally used for the past several years. Now, in December, late November, and in December of last year, I did a deep dive into Zap, figuring out what its capabilities are, how we could use that, and what it had to offer. So that was, I think, probably how I landed myself here. But in terms of burp versus Zap, we're not going to spend the whole day talking about that. I may accidentally say burp instead of Zap at some point. We're not going to spend the whole day comparing them. I will try to use the right words for things. I believe it's called requester in Zap. I may call it repeater by mistake. Things like that are possible, which is, burp's version of that piece of functionality. But they're both excellent tools. Burp is commercial. Zap is open source. The Zap team has done a fantastic job on it, in my opinion. It's got some rough spots. It's not perfect. So does burp.
Right. Yeah.
So
it's pretty rock solid for the most part, though.
Yeah. I think for anybody doing pen testing professionally or wanting to move in that direction, use whichever one you like. If you're on a team, use whichever one your team is standardized. Become familiar with that one. If you're just starting out and you're just picking one at random, you may get more out of Zap in the short term, because if you're not paying for the pro version of burp has got a more limited feature set. Now, the pro version of that is, I think it's still $3.99 a year or something like that. If you're being paid to do pen testing, it's within reach. But the other thing, and by the way, I'm not affiliated with either Portswigger, who does burp, or with the Zap team. So it's not a paid promotion. I think in the long term as well, if you're just picking and it doesn't matter to you which one you start with, I think for power users, there's actually more on offer in Zap. And that's owing to we're not going to touch the scripting interface today. It's complex, it's advanced, but it does have a really powerful scripting capabilities in there. I'll point them out, but we won't actually use them for today. It's just too big a topic.
Yeah, you could do an entire webinar for 2 hours on that alone. Well, actually, probably more than 2 hours on that alone. But
yeah, if that's a topic that interests you, you look up on YouTube, Simon Bennett, who's the founder of the Zap project and current project lead for it. He has a Zest scripting. I'm going to type that in the chat. Zest scripting. That.
I was just checking to make sure that Simon wasn't here. Oh no!
He has a Zest scripting YouTube video that's like, I want to say it's an hour and a half or 2 hours long. Like I said, it's a big topic on its own, but he covers it far better than I ever could. So that's there. Just know that is out there. All right. So back to the question that started me down this path. What is the interception proxy for? Well, normally if I'm using a web browser to access a web app, right? Your regular basic, I'm a user use case. I open up my web browser. I navigate to the URL. My web browser sends a request out to the server, pulls back resources to my machine, to my browser, which opens the document, usually in that case, parses that, requests additional resources, your CSS, your JavaScript, etc. Pulls all that through more requests, loads it into the environment, runs it, displays it to me. And as I navigate around the site or use the functionality on the site, it makes additional requests to the server and gets those responses back. It's all, I don't want to say all HTTP traffic. I started to say it and then I realized, no, well, there's also WebSockets and, I mean, SSE is technically HTTP, but it's using multiplex, or not multiplex, is it reusing the same connection, and that sort of thing. But
your primary HTTP traffic that you're going to be seeing that passes back and forth the requests and responses and everything, that's what we're trying to capture with the interception proxy.
We still mostly look at HTTP traffic, and that could take the form of the requests. Look like requests. There are different types of requests. Some of them carry a payload and some of them don't. But if the request has a body, if it's carrying a payload, it could have JSON, or it could have proto buffers, or it could have a GraphQL query, which is JSON based, or JSON-like at least. But it could be, form URL encoded. So it's in the body of the request. We'll look at some requests. This will be clearer in a minute. But it's that syntax that you sometimes also see in the URL where it's a value, or rather a key, and then equals a value, and then an ampersand, and then the next one, and the next one. That was the classic way of handling HTTP, or rather HTML forms when you would post them. So the traffic can look a lot of different ways. And then resources coming back could again be JSON, or it could be any of a number of data formats, or it could be the HTML document or other resources like images and scripts and such. So that's your traffic, and all that's going back and forth as you're using the app in your browser. Zap, or your interception proxy, whether it's Zap or Burp or something else, it sits in between your browser and that server, or rather all servers, in most cases. So your traffic goes, you send that request, it goes from your browser to Zap to the server. The response comes back to Zap and then your browser. So it sits in between capturing traffic, doing things like passive analysis on it, and feeding into other tools that you can use to manipulate that traffic or try things out. And that's kind of the rough overview of where it sits in the tool chain and what role it plays. If you're more from the developer side, maybe you've used Fiddler. Fiddler is less focused on security-based testing, but it works essentially the same way. Yeah. I think I thought there was another.
You're going black.
Yeah, I know. I let it fall asleep. Okay. There. Hopefully the whole audience didn't at the same time. Okay. So that's what Zap's for, right? Zap's the interception thing. So let's go into Zap. Yeah.
So Zap stands for Zed Attack Proxy, which is primarily what it does, right? Like that's what we're using it for, is to attack with.
Zeds? Zeds?
Zed Attack Proxy.
Yeah.
Because you Canadians can't pronounce Z correctly.
I think everybody else pronounces Zed just fine. All right. Grabbing some notes here so I don't miss anything else that I wanted to hit on the web.
So we want to start a project, which we've done. We want to turn the HUD off, the proxy on, and go to protected mode.
Yeah, that's right. Oh, you know what? I never looked up. I never revisited what the modes actually do. So
basically, I'll go over some of that real quick.
Okay.
You have safe mode, protected mode, and standard mode, and attack mode, what you see there, right? Mm-hmm. Safe mode is basically, hey, we're just browsing through this. It doesn't do a whole lot. It doesn't really do anything, right? You're just browsing through. You're looking at the traffic. It's kind of like if anybody's ever run responder on a network and you just want to look at what's coming across without actually responding to anything. It's the same kind of concept, right? Protected mode, that's where you set up basically targets and scope. And this keeps you from going outside of scope. All right. This keeps you from attacking anything that's not specifically set as something to attack. Standard mode is where you can actually basically anything that comes across the traffic that comes across, you can repeat it, you can attack it, you can modify and do whatever. So it's a little more dangerous, specifically in a pen testing scenario, because of the simple fact that you could go outside of scope, right? Like you want to make sure that you don't do that specifically for, what we do. We have to stay inside of scope. If we go outside of scope, there's a lot of problems that get caused with that, and we're not going to get into that. It's outside of the scope of this webcast, and yes, pun intended. Attack mode is very interesting. This is where you actually get to automated scanning, right? This is where it actually you go spidering, it does fuzzing for you, it does all sorts of other things for you that can help you just find vulnerabilities that maybe it might take you a little while going through the different pieces of everything. Unfortunately, it can also get outside of scope, I believe, to a degree. You could tell it, hey, listen, I only want to attack this particular URL, this domain, whatever. But if it's not configured properly, it can actually go outside of that and start kind of spidering out and branching out to other pieces as well. So that's why we want to make sure that we stay either in standard mode or protected mode. If it's something that, for instance, if you have an application that is very sensitive, and if you're a pen tester or if you're an app developer, what sensitive is, right? Like we've been told numerous times, hey, listen, like, you can look at this, but be careful about, what you throw at it versus just, go out and explore, see what's there. Right. And so we have all sorts of different customers that tell us that all the time. So this is the reason why whenever you're using these different modes, you want to make sure that it's customized to the purpose that you're trying to fulfill for your client.
Right. So if you didn't notice, it was standard mode when we came in, and I have switched it to protected mode because I don't want it letting me easily attack things that are not in scope. Which brings us to the point of scopes. But before we can get stuff into scopes, we need to start proxying traffic and looking at that. So there's a quick start, which is handy. It's got a manual explorer option, which is what I'm going to use. And
you can see there it says attacking arbitrary URLs is not permitted.
Oh yeah,
in protected or safe mode. So you actually have to tell Zap what you want it to explore.
So
what you want to capture, even, I believe, right?
Maybe. Okay, let's see how it works out. So I'm gonna do Dojo-Basic. Sorry, our kind of more old style of app as a target, and that's port 8443 in Samurai. And I'm going to use I'm going to use the launch browser button. And we'll see if it works. I've had it work a whole lot of times in Samurai. On my own desktop, it worked once and never worked again. But I'm going to go through the process for setting up proxying when it doesn't work anyway. So this looks promising. Okay. Yeah. So that popped up. And that has opened the website. It's showing it. It is on HTTPS on port 8443. Which is all good. If you are following along and you haven't been to Dojo-Basic, there is a URL. I don't know if you can see this. reset-db.php. I'll put that in the chat. Wow, that's right. I will not put it in the chat by copying and pasting.
I got it.
3 and reset db.php. That's the path.
Oh, you got it.
Yeah. I type things. This is what I do.
Mick types about 3 words a minute more than I do.
So we're here. We browsed here. We used that Firefox that it launched, and you can see down here in the history, it's got some traffic on that same host. It's actually the traffic of me browsing to it through the browser that is automatically proxying through Zap. I know somebody earlier mentioned the embedded browser in Chromium. This is not quite the same, or rather the embedded Chromium in Burp. This is not quite the same. I said I wasn't going to keep comparing the two. But it actually does a pretty good job solving the main problem. Yeah. So the other thing, there were 3 little window layout things up here that I'm going to use showing you stuff in Zap right now. And what they do is they change the distribution of these sort of 3 panes here. I've got the big one on the top right. I've got the slightly smaller one on the top left, and I've got this one across the bottom. And I found something about the VM makes it so that when they resize, they don't resize very well. I didn't have that issue at all when I was running it on my desktop. Running it in the VM, for some reason, that issue happens. And so in order to avoid shrinking something into an unusable size, I'm going to make use of those to change the view. So be aware that I'm doing that. If I were running this on my machine with the intent of doing a pen test, not running it in a VM, and had my full screen real estate to work with, I would just make this window big and have it fill a screen, and there'd be plenty of space to use the 3 without doing all that resizing. So
what we're looking at here, Mick,
history.
We're looking at the different sites, right? You're looking at the sites that actually show up, and you can then pull that down and look at all the different folders, directories, and everything that's in there, right? Mm-hmm. At the bottom pane, you're looking at the history. This is actually like all the different requests that were made. And if you look over here at the left-hand side, you see ID, right? That's the number, just like in Burp, right? It's the number of the request. So you can actually sequentially see which is going back and forth. It shows you, of course, the URL, the method, so you can get like get, post, put, delete, whatever else, right? Your timestamps, your codes, your HTTP codes, 200, which is 200 okay, or 403 forbidden, whatever. Forbidden would be in reason right there where it says okay. Your size. RTT, I think, is what the time it took for the request to come back to you.
Yeah, the round trip time.
Right. And then also this is really interesting. Your alerts right there, right? This is a interesting piece that's not in Burp that I think adds some value, right? The alerts show like, hey, this may have something here that you should look at. And so as you move through the different pieces of the web application, it kind of directs you to say, oh, okay, maybe I should go look at this page real quick versus this page, so you can help prioritize while you're doing pen testing and stuff like that, right?
Yep.
Which is really interesting that Mozilla Cloudflare has some medium flags on their stuff too.
Yeah, and so if you just saw that extra bit of traffic pop up there, that's me idling and Firefox doing stuff. Because Firefox or Chrome or pretty much any other Chromium, they do some of that in the background. It's actually convenient for today because it gives us some out of scope traffic in our capture here that we can later ignore. I think I'm going to browse a little bit more, not a lot. I just want to populate a little more traffic. And so I want that. I'm going to browse around. Try to remember here. Outside the scope of the penetration test. Oh, yeah. That's all the stuff for helping you use the target. This is me not paying attention to where I'm clicking. So I'm browsing around the unauthenticated portion of this app. And I'm going to hop back into Zap in a second here, and we'll have a bunch of new traffic there. A handful of new requests. And you can see some more there. And possibly there might be a few more things in this sitemap. I didn't really fully enumerate it before. Because of the structure of this particular app, there may not be a ton of entries there.
Dojo-Basic is really relatively small. It's built specifically to find some low-level, entry-level vulnerabilities for web app testing and stuff like that. It's a lot of fun to go through. And there's also, if you get interested in this stuff, there's Dojo. What's the other one?
Scavenger.
Dojo Scavenger. Yes, thank you. And that's actually a CTF type thing that you can go through, find the different pieces and the different vulnerabilities, and get the flags, put the flags in, and have fun with it. Juice Shop is built the same, but there's some issues with getting Juice Shop on here right now that we talked about earlier, actually, in the webcast. So
yeah, it's not really a Juice Shop problem specifically. That's our problem. it's our script that pulls Juice Shop.
That's true.
Got confused by a change to GitHub.
Yeah, GitHub screwed us up. That's what happened. I'm totally blaming GitHub, not our script.
All right. So
one of the other things I want to talk about real quick, Nate. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
We have a question here about spidering. So yes, you could run the spider, and at least in the unauthenticated space, it should actually follow it through to map all the endpoints. I don't like approaching an app that way when I do testing. And the reason for that is that doesn't help me personally build a good understanding of what the application does and how it's put together. Which really brings us to mapping, which we can talk about. But so spidering in Zap, it's actually got two different types of spider in there. There's an Ajax spider and a regular spider.
Explain the difference.
Ajax uses Ajax. If I recall correctly, it uses something. You've got a choice of drivers for it, but things like Selenium,
right,
to be able to actually render and execute script.
Basically with a regular spider, whenever you're looking at a regular spider in a web app, it's going through and finding all the HTML links or all the Ahrefs links and stuff like that in there, right? But a lot of spiders will actually miss, particularly in single page applications, SPAs, that are built on React, jQuery, stuff like that. It will miss the different pieces that actually connect to others, and that's where the Ajax spider comes in.
React jQuery is not such a common example, although people totally have, combining it with like routing libraries and stuff.
I've tested one or two, but yeah, I've noticed that it's not super common.
But jQuery's main things, it provided Ajax capabilities and DOM manipulation, manipulating the document object model, which is sort of an older approach to building websites. That doesn't make it worse, but yeah. So React, Angular, and Vue are the established big frameworks in the single page application space. And then you've got some big up and comers like Svelte, which is by Rich Harris. You've got Solid.js, which is compatible. I think there's a migration path for people that are used to working in React, but it doesn't use the shadow DOM to do rendering and diffing. You've got one called Quick, that's QWIK, I think, like the chocolate syrup you mix into your milk.
I prefer Hershey syrup.
I didn't know if that was a Canadian reference. So I wasn't sure you'd get it. But
well, we have Nesquik, right?
Yeah,
but it's not QW. I think it's just QU.
Yeah.
Oh wait, did you say QU?
Maybe no. It's the framework is QW.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
But it's a different approach. Again, things sort of structured in a component-like structure, but they're really built for maximum performance and stuff like rendering at edge and that sort of thing. Anyway, that's a pretty big aside. But the point is that there are applications where so much of the UI and the transitions of the UI as you navigate around are not actually you navigating between documents. They are the application rendering new bits of content in your browser. And so old conventional spidering didn't work for those types of apps. It didn't. It look at the document and it would find whatever links were there, which were none or not many. And then it would say, hey, I'm done, and have no coverage of the app.
Right. And that's one of the reasons that old conventional scanning also for vulnerabilities and stuff didn't work very well as well, is because single page applications and the way that everything is set up, because it basically it generates it in browser instead of on the server. Yeah. So that's one way to look at it. One of the other things I really wanted to touch on real quick, Mick, was the filter.
Yeah. This one
filter is a really nice. If you click where it says filter off right there, you can actually tell Zap, hey, I want to look specifically at these methods, these codes, these tags, whatever else, right? And then basically ignore everything else. And so you can put a URL. The INC, of course, is include. EXE is exclude. Yep. So you could say, hey, I only want to look at Dojo-Basic. I don't want to look at Mozilla Cloudflare or Firefox-settings-attachments.cdn.mozilla.net, which is what mine is coming up with, right? Yeah. So you can exclude different things. Now, one of the ways that we typically like to approach it is get everything in there so that we can actually see where all the application goes to all the different places. And then if we need to, we can scale that down to zero in on what we want to get to. But you can get a lot of excess traffic in here that'll just kind of really kind of just slow down and bog down the process. So I do like to narrow down my targets a little bit using the filter and everything.
On that subject of narrowing down targets, you've also got contexts and scope, which are cool, and we need to talk about anyway. So right here, you can see it's created a default context that was already there when I got here. It's got a little window picture with a little red target icon in it. I don't know how clear that's coming across. That little red target icon means that the default context is in scope. But currently, there's nothing in the default context. Now, if I decided to add Dojo-Basic to the default context, I can do that by just right-clicking on it in the site tree there. Include site and context, default context, and it has populated a regular expression rule. It's opened up the session properties pane and populated a regular expression rule to include that host in that context. Now, if I hit OK on that, what you might or might not be able to see well is that this little red target icon, similar to the one on this window up here, has shown up on this folder, and on each of the request icons inside of it, these all have little red targets because they are now in scope. But I go here, I'm right-clicking on my default context, and what am I doing? Double-clicking on my default context, and I'm going to remove Dojo-Basic from the scope like that. I can do that. And hit OK. So I've taken it out of the context. I can also create a new context, and that's the one. With that little, it's the little window with the green plus sign just above the sitemap there. And I'm going to call it, I don't know, Dojo. And it has its own in-scope checkbox here. So now Dojo is there listed as a separate context, and that is in scope. And I can similarly, I can right-click on Dojo-Basic's kind of root node there, and
hit including context or option down.
That's what I want.
Oh, include site and yeah, okay, yeah.
Include site and context. Works similarly, but it's for now the Dojo context. And actually, if you see the tree menu on the left here is expanded, it now has a second context with really all the same options in it. I can hit OK on that.
So if you right-click on there and it goes including context, that first option that was 3 options down, that includes it in the default context, correct?
It has a choice.
Or you can make a new context from there. Okay.
You can make a new context from there as well. Yeah. But so now I've put Dojo into this context, and that makes it easy for me to. I notice there's an export context there as well, but I can modify that context. And I'm trying to remember, there are options here for building in authentication and that sort of thing. I remember being able to toggle things in and out of scope easily through context before. I'm currently blanking on how to do. Is it this? I think it's this. Show only URLs in scope. That's actually handy though, because sometimes that's what you want to do.
Which is filtering, right?
Yeah. So generally when you're mapping, when you're exploring the application for the first time and you're not familiar with it and you're trying to figure out what's going on, you don't want to hide all the out of scope stuff, because some of the out of scope stuff maybe is supposed to be in scope, but some of it could be related to the core of how the app is actually working. Could be, for example, an API service that's feeding it data, but is not a host that you knew you were expecting to see. And so you start seeing all that traffic driving the functionality of the app to this out of scope thing, as long as you've not filtered it away from your view. And that, in our case, is going to prompt a discussion with our client. We're going to have to say, hey, we see a lot of traffic, a lot of stuff driving functionality that is this API that you didn't tell us to expect. Is that supposed to be in scope, or should we leave it alone? And there isn't a wrong answer there. The only wrong answer is us assuming it's in scope and attacking it, only to find out later that it wasn't, or assuming it shouldn't be in scope, skipping over it, only to find out that we have failed to provide a good test. So
the key there is ask questions of your client.
Don't assume. Don't assume.
Communication is key. I've made that mistake recently.
It is good to communicate. Okay. I'm trying to remember now. This has the same sort of scope toggle on it.
Makes it a lot easier to read that stuff.
Which is good. I could have sworn. I think when I went through this before, I was also using a slightly older version of it previously, and they changed things. They've been changing things, building new things quickly in Zap. So I may have.
I think we did all this in 2.9.
Yeah. So I may have moments where something is not quite how I remember, or I just don't remember, because it's amazing how much happens in like 2.5 months time. All right. There's one more thing I want to run through really quick, if I can, because it's related to setup, and I want to do it before we move on. Here's the Firefox that it had opened. This is a different Firefox window that I launched from my menu. Applications, Internet, Firefox web browser right there. Hey, Chromium actually finally turned up. I thought that install failed. Okay, so this is here. I'm going to do the really risky thing here and search the internet for something in the middle of a live demo, which couldn't possibly go wrong.
Yeah, what could go wrong?
And okay, so go to Firefox extensions, proxy standard. I'm going to go ahead and add that to Firefox. Okay, and so I have proxy standard here. Now I'm going to close that. I'm probably going to
Big thanks to Eric Young for making this particular extension
and maintaining it for like 15 years.
Yeah.
There are options here, so I'll open those up. I'm going to add a proxy. I'm going to run through this part pretty quick. It's just not what you want to spend your time on, but you do need to, if you're going to use Zap, it's important to be able to do this in case when you go and launch the browser from Zap, it doesn't work, or maybe you want to use a browser that isn't in the list.
One of the things I do want to talk about real quick too, I use Chrome for most of my browsing and everything. Actually, I think all of it. I don't think I use Firefox for a whole lot, just because I've been set up on Chrome for years, and quite frankly, I'm stuck in my ways. One of the things that I would recommend, though, especially if you start getting into doing this kind of testing and everything, is to set up different browser profiles. That way that you can have a profile for your personal stuff. You can have a profile for work stuff. You can have a profile for, I'll give you an example. I have a profile, 5 different ones right now, I think. I have a profile for personal, for work, for B-Sides OK, for training stuff, and for actual pen testing stuff. And I'll use the training one if I need to separate, like if I'm testing 2 different authentications, right? If I've got 2 different users that I'm testing, then I'll set up one in one browser and one in the other browser, and I'll still have them both proxy through my, Zap, Burp, whatever I'm using.
Yeah.
But they hold 2 separate profiles. And so it helps to understand how the different pieces communicate together with each other and how they are separate. So I would highly recommend setting up different profiles if you're doing any kind of testing whatsoever from your normal profile. That way it's just easier and you don't have to worry about switching back and forth all the time.
Yeah. You don't probably want to proxy the main browser you're doing stuff in unless you have a separpt profile for doing
that. You definitely don't want to get stuff in your proxy.
Yeah.
Banking stuff.
That's what'll inevitably happen is if you're doing that, you'll accidentally log into some sensitive site you have and capture your own credentials, and then you've got these credentials stored, not sufficiently protected, possibly, that you have to figure out how to scrub. Not good. So 127.0.0.1, because Zap is listening on the local loopback, that's what I put in there. Because my instance of Zap is listening on 8081. That's what I've put into the port. Again, the default is 8080. I hit save on that. I now have an entry in the list. And I can toggle it on and off by clicking the little fox up here and picking Zap or not. Turn it off there. It does actually allow you to set up patterns to have it only proxy specific URLs as well. So that's an option. Was there error in there? Okay. So switch Zap back on. And in this browser, I'm going to go to Wayfarer, which is my other target. Same port, 8443. And you can see here it didn't accept the cert. Just checking. Do I still have everybody here? Yep. Okay.
I'm here. I just had to step away real quick because my somebody was knocking on my door.
Okay. I had a moment of wondering if I was talking into a void because I was the one who fell out of the webinar. Okay. So yeah. So I set up my proxy. I pulled up Wayfarer. Now I've got a cert error because Firefox doesn't trust the certificate that Zap is using to sign the TLS in encrypted traffic.
And you're going to see this in Chrome, Firefox, and really any other modern browser that it's not going to trust the root certificate yet. So you have to install it, right?
Yep. Yeah. You have to set up the trust on it. You would hit the same thing in burp, of course. This is just to explain it in the shortest path possible. We talked about there used to be a connection between or request going between the browser and the server. And the server has its cert, which is trusted. It comes from some sort of issuing chain where we already trust it because of cert trust built into our operating system normally. So it sends it down and it negotiates the TLS connection, and its cert looks good, and it sends down the traffic, and we're all happy. Now we've stuck something in the middle of that, and the thing in the middle of that can't just use the upstream cert after it decrypts the traffic. If it could do that, TLS would be useless.
Yeah,
so,
it would be totally broken.
So it re-signs it with its own cert, but we don't trust that cert yet. Or rather, Firefox has not been configured to trust that cert. The way this part works varies a little bit from browser to browser, and it can vary quite a bit from operating system to operating system. Windows has the certificate manager, and I think everything ends up getting pushed over to there. The Mac, I think everything gets pushed into Keychain. In Linux, you tend to be able to do it at the browser level, which makes it really convenient for demos like this. I'm going to go to http://zap. Not a URL, not the suggested download spot where I've been before, just Zap. And so this is a UI served up from my machine, from my instance of Zap that is running. And this one has a download link for the CA certificate, the certificate authority certificate, CA root. So that is there, and I can download it, and then I can set up the trust for it. This only, by default, listens on the local loopback in Zap. So
yeah, you don't want to go to your proxy, like the proxy port for this one. Notice how there's no colon 8081 after this. This is just straight HTTP.
Yep. It's the Zap is responding to this request when it reaches it, rather than passing it on somewhere. The other thing to know about this cert is you have one too. Yours is not the same as mine. Every installation of Zap automatically generates a different one. You can rotate it if you have to in the options, but yeah, I can trust this one without trusting everybody else who's running Zap because it's a generated certificate that's different for everyone. So for every install.
Now I usually install this to my trusted root certificates, right?
Yeah, that's where I'm going. So
I'm making sure. That's the way I've always done it. I mean,
no, it's right. It's right. So yeah, I've gone into settings. I filtered with the word cert. That's how I do it here. That's how I do it if I'm doing it in Chrome. They're in slightly different places in the options, but cert gets you there. And then, yeah, so I'm under authorities. I do an import. I pick my, there's another cert there. I pick the one I just downloaded. Open it. And then I trust it to identify websites. That's what's important to me for this one.
But what about email users? What if we want to fish you?
Okay. There we go. So I've done that. I've done the trust. I go back over here and I refresh that, and it lands me on the login page like it's supposed to.
Boom.
Sort error is gone. So that's setting up the proxy, kind of the manual process for setting it up if launching the browser doesn't work. When I went in through the quick start, I'll go back there. When I went in through the quick start, okay, this one, hit Manual Explorer and launch the browser from here. It launched it still used the system install of the browser. It's not built into Zap, but it has I don't know how they implemented it. It's hooked up with Marionette to hide the cert issues or automatically set up the trust. I'm not sure which. In either case, the cert trust wasn't an issue. So there are two ways to set it up. Both good to know how to do both. You might notice that I've got the HUD disabled. I don't remember if it's enabled by default for other people. That is a feature in Zap that takes some of the functionality from this view here and overlays it using the proxy into the browser window where you're looking at stuff. It's a neat idea. I personally don't like working that way. And that comes down to a few reasons. One is I have more than enough screen real estate to just put Zap on one screen and put my browser on a different screen and have them both up in the full window modes. And some of it's just, I don't like having extra artifacts over top of it that aren't part of the app I'm testing. It would have the same issue running, say, a password manager that inserts little icons into the fields and offers to fill them for me. I wouldn't like that in my testing browser. That would be a thing that is there that is not there because of the client app. It's there because of my tooling. Should be confusing. The other thing, as we go through, we're going to jump in pretty quickly here into doing some mapping, repeating and tampering with some requests and doing some fuzzing and that sort of thing. And probably we'll do a little bit of attack mode. But before we do that, one thing I wanted to quickly mention, I don't have my developer tools open right now. They're there. Web developer tools. They let you browse the DOM. They let you use the inspect tool to look at where a specific element is. We're not teaching developer tools today. This is out of scope.
That's another 2-hour webcast.
if that was, honestly, you probably get 4 hours out of dev tools.
Oh, easily. Yeah. Maybe even all day or 2 days.
There's a lot of tooling here. I'm leaving this shut for this demonstration so that it's not taking up screen real estate and being a distraction. When testing an application, I would normally like to have them open. They give me more stuff to look at. They give me, are there any JavaScript errors on the console? What about when I put in this input and submit it and it's malformed? Then are there errors on the console? Or I tried a thing and it rendered a weird bit on the form. Well, okay, why is it weird? And then I can go and inspect it. That sort of thing. Dev tools are good for that. And so I recommend opening them, using them, getting used to testing with them as well. But I won't be using them today because they take up valuable screen real estate. Here you can see I use the 3 dots, whatever it's called, thing there, ellipses. And there are options here. I can dock it someplace else in the window. I can also pull out the dev tools into a separate window that I could throw off to the side or on another screen or something. So they don't necessarily have to be in the way. Certainly if you've got multiple displays, you can probably find a place for them, either in the browser or out of it if you've got a big window. you maybe just leave them snapped in. Yeah, it's I believe that to do the best web testing you can, that is a tool that you should be using. But so I generally tell people that they should use it. Okay, so let's do some fun stuff. First of all, let's tempt fate a little bit here, and I'm going to use this browser. I'm going to log in. Samurai. So the password for Wayfarer, assuming it's working. Aaron was saying his isn't.
I'm getting a bad gateway right now.
Oh, okay. That just means the app's not up.
Huh?
That means the app is not up. You get it in.
I just turned it up. Like I just restarted it.
It's not working.
Yes. Oh, yep. Nope, that's right. Yep, that's it now. Service Wayfarer SQL DB error response from Damon. Okay.
Okay. So there are usernames here for, I think, Samurai Manager, Samurai Admin, and Samurai. They all use the same password, which is also Samurai. These accounts, they're set up in that way and smushed into the same team in the application. It's got teams rather than actually having proper tenancy. In order to create kind of the sense that these are test accounts that you would receive as a pen testing vendor, or possibly a bug bounty program could put accounts out there as well. So tickets, unassigned, and this is structured. Not a lot of tickets in here, but I can create a ticket. Go, select a team, assign a user, assign it to them, and I'm going to submit the ticket. We'll see if it works. Ticket successfully created. Would be great if it cleared it or took it away, but it doesn't. But if I look at tickets, if I look at the team, I think, yeah, here we go. You can see open tickets. It's not a very good app. There it is. So there is a ticket. We've gone through, and what I've done here, I went through as we've been going here. I kind of navigated around. I went to, this is great. Look at all these tickets. I found a spot with lots of data. I went around and sort of navigated to the different functionality in this application. Now, if I go back over to Zap here, I've got API.wayfarer.test. I've got some traffic there. I've got Wayfarer.test as well, which has some traffic there. And I'm going to create a new context called Wayfarer. And I'm still going to have it in scope. And then I'm going to add both of these to that same context. So include in context, Wayfarer, add it. And if I go to the API one, I can include in context. There we go. Wayfarer as well. And you can see it's added another rule there. So we've got two Wayfarers in there. Both of them are set up. I'm wondering if it populated in there because I saw something happen over there. Okay, so, and then if I scroll down, I've got lots of traffic. I'm actually going to, just to make it a little easier on myself, I'm going to click twice here on the ID to flip the sort order on it so that the new requests bubble up to the top and push the list down. So that comes down to a matter of personal preference.
I will admit I used to do it the opposite way, and I've switched, and it's just so much easier.
Yeah.
It took a little bit of getting used to, but it really is easier to see your latest request, and then you can scroll back down.
Yep. And now let me see if I can make this a little bit wider so we can get a little bit more of the URL. in the columns there. You can see I'm not wanting to actually resize parts of the window. Yeah, you can see traffic there, and this is a lot of API traffic, lots and lots of API traffic. And what you won't see, you go here, you've got some static assets, some SVG, so images, ping, that's an image, icode, that's an image, socket thing, which I think is because it's actually running on a dev server in a container. That's got some hot reloading stuff. And then it's got the original get request for the actual page, and a static thing containing JavaScript bundles, because that's what single page apps tend to look like. Now, if I open that, I can open it, resend it with that request editor. That's an option. So I can do it from there. I should have closed that line. Let me grab that. I can do it from there. I can also go down here and pick a request from the history and do the exact same thing. Open, resend. I happen to pick a course pre-flight because I
was going to say
looking. Let me grab this one instead. Open and resend it in the request editor. And I've got the request there. I can hit send on that and get the response again. And you might recognize there's some JSON data in here with the same stuff we saw on that view that actually had a bunch of tickets. So it's data, it's got IDs, titles, bodies, a bunch of ticket information in there. And all that was me just resending this request, this API request to user 6 tickets, to the API and receiving it back. Now, an obvious thing that I might try here, seeing as there's user 6 tickets,
go down one.
What if there are user 5 tickets?
Or 4.
I didn't mean to go to 4. I just don't type well that way. This looks like a very similar list of tickets. Okay. Let's try 4.
Now, if anybody's also familiar with user 0 in Linux, that's root. So sometimes that works as well.
Yeah. Okay. I can sort of enumerate down this way and see if I see a difference. That's a way of playing around with it. I'm skipping down to 1 here, and this looks like the same data for all of them. But I mean, that's an example of just simple. I'm modifying the request and submitting it and seeing if I get something different. And in this case, this is it's called a route parameter, which is part of the URL that is
one of the things I'm sorry, go ahead, Nick.
That is also a parameter.
Oh. Well, I was just going to say, one of the ways that you can also go through this is you can automate this process, fuzzing it, right?
Yeah.
By, you could just select, hey, listen, I want to select this 1 right here and throw a whole bunch of numbers at it. The fuzz right there, I believe, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you can actually pick your parameter out.
Yeah, I see I've got a fuzz location already populated. I'm not sure why that's. Just take that away. I'm sure I didn't want that. So I can add that. So I highlighted it and I hit add, and I've got a location. I can add strings I want to try, or it's got other options. Numbers, maybe.
You got to pronounce it right. Numbers.
I'm not going to do that. From 1 to 10. I can generate a preview, see what that looks like. I can add those. I can save them if I wanted to. I can also, I'm not going to in this case, but I can apply processors to it, to the payload to change it. For example, if I wanted to base 64 encode them, I could do that. And you can see I've generated a list of payloads that are base 64 encoded versions of these. Right. I'm going to cancel that because that's not what I actually want to do here. Now, okay. And I hit OK. And I can start the fuzzer. Now this is going to go very quickly, but what it is going to do is it's going to take each of those payloads in the list, in my case, sequential list of numbers, 1 to 10, and reissue this request with the value from the list put into this spot. And
you can see right there where it says message type fuzzed.
Yeah.
So this actually, one of the things that you should notice, before we were in the history tab down here on the bottom right, history, search, alerts, outputs, etc. Right. Well, this opened up a new tab, fuzzer. So if you get lost and you're looking around, you're like, what happened to the rest of my stuff? You just have to go back over to the history to find out, where it went. And then, it just tells you each individual request, what popped up. You can click on this now on any one of them and see what the response was.
And so a few things to point out here. First of all, you see the payloads down the side here, which is what it actually used in that spot on the request. You can see that they are all identical in size, which suggests that changing this parameter didn't change the response, which is consistent with what we saw before. You can also see this state here marking them as reflected, which in this case is probably, as far as finding an actual issue, is a false positive. What it's saying is this payload appeared in the response verbatim, which it did as part of an ID that's got generated stuff with numbers in it. And because single integers are such common occurrences in randomly generated strings of numbers, they have all found a match.
Now, of course, if you're using stuff like cross-site scripting payloads or something like that, and you see reflected, that's, depending on your perspective, a good thing or a bad thing. For us, it's fun, right? So it's a good thing for us, for our clients.
That's exactly when that state is useful to you. Would be if you're trying injection flaws, you're trying cross-site scripting payloads, you're trying something where you shouldn't see your payload in the response, but you are, or it shouldn't be verbatim. It's got special characters that should be getting encoded if it's coming back, and they're not. Then it'll show up as reflected. I had another good case. That's gone now. Oh, error messages. You've generated some sort of error message that printed out what you put in, which can lead to other things. It could be an SQL error message. You can decide whether I wanted to call it SQL or SQL. You almost got a combination of both there. You might get an SQL error message, for example, if they're not handling the parameter correctly, or parameterization, safe usage. You might get an error message that itself doesn't actually present an exploit, but is rendering to the page in a way that is not safe. And so your reflected parameter that's causing an error actually turns into a cross-site scripting flaw. So there are a lot of reasons reflected can be interesting. In this case, as far as being a security issue goes and actually being a truer reflection of the payload back into the response, these are a false positive. So kind of got ahead of ourselves moving directly from repeater into fuzzer as quickly as we did, but that's kind of it's
a natural progression, actually.
It is. Yeah. So we saw one way of doing the repeating. That was with the request editor. Open resend with request editor. You also see down here, these requests have appeared, unlike the fuzzing ones. The fuzzing ones didn't appear in the history, but these ones did. And these ones have a different source marked on them. And I'm worried about doing this. There we go. So you can see these were not captured by browsing around using the browser and captured through the proxy. They were captured from a manual source, from something where I was tampering with the data in Zap. And so they're marked separately. So the other way, try to choose a request. I'm having a hard time here. I'm going to grab this one. So the other way that I could do request editing, there is a, where are you? Opening requester tab there, which it works pretty much the same way as the request editor. I don't know if there's any kind of a difference there. It doesn't show very well on the small screen real estate that we're using in the VM, but it does have over on the side there a replay button. See if I can get it somewhere. There we go. There's a send button. And so just like over there, I can do replaying of traffic. In this case, I changed the team and I got a 404 team not found. Change the team to team 2. I get the customer support team. I'm looking in this tiny little spot down here is where I'm actually seeing it. And then team 1, the help desk team. Team 0 should be root. No team found. So, yeah. So you've got requester there as well, which sits up here along with the request and response tabs where I had the quick start. It also has tabs under it, which brings us to a really important thing. If I double click the tab, I can name it, which is good if you have a bunch of tabs that you're keeping track of where you found interesting things.
And I've learned recently that is a property of, it's a property of Java.
Well,
Hey, that's what Jason told me. All right.
Yeah.
Actually, I believe Kevin told me that because Jason told him that.
And that, so sort of, yeah. It's Java's a pretty big ecosystem. I think it's a particular UI kit, but it's a common one. Maybe Swing. I'm not sure. Oh, a long time ago, I used to work with Swing apps, but it's been an awfully long time. And there are a few others around that are kind of a big deal.
Disregard anything I say about Java.
All right. So let's take a pop into alerts while we're here.
So these are interesting, right? This is where you actually see all the different potential, I want to say potential, okay, vulnerabilities here. You'll have some that actually probably will be legitimate vulnerabilities. Like if it tells you there's an absence of a CSRF token, a CSRF, cross-site request forgery token, that's more than likely going to be the case, right? Content security policy not set, that's more than likely going to be the case. That's also going to be a finding in a pen test report. There are going to be others, though, that may pop up there and say, hey, there looks like there's some kind of DOM manipulation here or whatever else, that if you go to try it, may or may not work. And that could be any number of reasons, but it may or may not be a finding. So it may or may not be valid. The point is for all of these, you're definitely going to want to validate any kind of flags, any kind of alerts that come up if you're doing any kind of testing, or if you're receiving any kind of testing. And, especially if you're one of our clients, we can help you walk through this stuff to understand what exactly we found, how we found it, and then how you can fix it from there. Or at least give you a general idea of how it can be fixed.
Here's an example of one that is not super. No, it's the blue ones, and I can't remember if blue was supposed to be low or informational in Zap, but they're little.
It's informational.
It's got it marked as an information disclosure, some suspicious comments, and what it has is this bundle has a comment pointing to bugs.chromium.org. It's highlighted the word bugs. You'd take one glance at that and you immediately go, well, that's not a real flaw. That's okay. But that is one of the challenges with, especially if you're working toward more of an automated flow. Looking at it is easy to manually verify. And if you're trying to automate it, then you need to figure out how to tune those out of the process, or just kind of, for these ones, you could probably think about whether you're getting any value out of that particular severity level and possibly just chop it off. But.
So I want to touch on this one real quick that we have on the screen right here. Normally, if you see something that says query, right, it's going to find that and it's going to say, hey, listen, this may be bad. It may be suspicious. And that's why you want to look at it, right? Because the word query can come up in any web app or whatever for any reason. Now, this one in particular actually is a vulnerability. And the reason you can tell is if you look directly below that where it's got $query equals select star from statements. That's a SQL or SQL, whatever, a SQL statement right there that also tells you that you're looking for a cookie UID. What this tells you more than likely is there's potential for SQL injection, SQL injection, whatever. I call it SQL. I have for years. I'm not changing. But this is a legit vulnerability. So don't overlook your info. Right? Your info may give you valuable information that you didn't think about. And the same applies to like any kind of vulnerability scans whatsoever. There may be stuff in your info that don't, my Wagner County's coming out, that doesn't get caught in the normal scanning process. Yeah. So make sure you check everything.
You can very easily have valid, interesting things in lower vulnerability levels, and then false positives, higher vulnerability levels. One of the challenges with building any sort of automated scanning into a process is, at first, there's a lot of stuff to sift through to figure out what is noise and what is not, and to figure out baselines of what needs to be weeded out in order to reduce the noise going forward. So it's well known as it to be a difficult process, in particular having a bunch of effort up front. So,
and this is passive vulnerability detection and scanning, correct? Maybe.
Yeah,
that's what we were kind of touching on here.
Everything we've done here, it has done not by issuing any kind of special constructed requests or additional requests. It has flagged these alerts based entirely off of the normal traffic that was captured through the way I was using the app in the browser. And I think the request editor also gets examined. So
what I'm trying to say, what Mick's trying to say is this is not active scanning right now. This is just, it's seeing stuff as it goes through. Active scanning is whenever we actually say, hey, listen, go scan this, find everything possible. And we'll get to that here in a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So I wanted to grab, there's another tool. I think it's the last kind of major tool in ZAP that I want to make sure that we touch on. Is it the post-authenticate one? Yeah, that's where the token gets issued. So because it's a common need these days to decode something, and it happens all the time. And you got an option right here. If you just highlight something and right-click it, you've got the encode, decode, hash code option on the menu. And I can flip that over to decode there, and ta-da, I've got the base64 decoded version of that payload. In this case, I grabbed the middle section of a JSON web token that I saw there.
Or a JOT.
Nobody calls it that.
We've had discussions about that, and I was told not to call it that. We don't call that around here. JWTs, yeah, the JWTs are really interesting. They're attackable, and there's probably some extensions that you can download and install in ZAP, to attack those as well. So they're a lot of fun.
Yeah, I'm trying to decide now. With the amount of time we have, we're not going to go into attacks against JWTs.
No. I'm just like, this is just for informational purposes at this point. Hey, listen. This is a baseline. Yeah. We're just giving you stuff so that you can go work with it later if you want.
It's what I would point out if we did go into that, there would be a lot more kind of scenery around it. But the point would be there are a handful of attacks that are well known against JWTs that are based on implementation flaws, either in the configuration of the libraries used or flaws in the libraries themselves. These days, it's more often the configuration. And they're not difficult to test manually just by encoding and decoding parts of the payload and then using the requester or the request editor to, I avoided calling it repeater.
I'm proud of you.
To replay with the modified parts. So, okay. Trying to think. So,
Let's see.
I wanted to show you the scripts. Not that we're going to go into them in detail, but they are here.
Have we touched on the actual interception?
Oh yeah, no, we haven't. We'll do that really quick. I just wanted to open these. They're here. They're scripts for doing all sorts of things. Some of them are more advanced manipulation of your fuzzing traffic. Some of them are for being able to do authentication. If you're doing something involving like an authenticated active scan of an app, then an ideal option, if you can do it, is to script the authentication so that it knows how to log into the app and then use what it receives to access the other pages in the app. If it's a fairly simple app and you're doing a one-off scan, you may find that it is easier to use, what's it called? Replacer. And so you log in yourself. You grab your bearer token or your session cookie or whatever the thing is and use Replacer here.
Is that a shell shock? I love it.
Is it?
To replace user agent? User agent is replaced with shell shock strain.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, so you can set up a replacement rule in here to insert that bearer token or that cookie as a header, and then have the scanner use that. It's a quick and dirty and easier way to do it for a one-off versus the scripting, which is, like I kind of indicated earlier, it is a big area of its own to learn. I think there's a lot for the power user to be had by figuring that out and integrating that into how you work with Zap. But it's not the most approachable part of it. So, yeah. See the spider there. Watching me spider something is probably not going to be super useful. Let me go to, I'll use up here. Dojo-Basic and just show where it is. So, you can see it. I can't actually get my cursor onto it. There's an attack submenu there. Let me see if I can make that accessible to myself. Still no. Try one more time. He's doing it in the same spot. Oh, it's so not fair. All right, let me see if I can.
Awesome.
Let me see if I can resize the VM window just slightly. You see the flickering there as I do that. See if I can get that within reach. Yeah, there we go. So in here, you've got Spider, Ajax Spider. The attack with fuzz is there as well if I wanted to send the request to the fuzzer from there. And that doesn't necessarily have to be the root node. That could be a child node.
Save icon.
But you got Spider, Ajax Spider, the active scan are all in there.
I'm curious, what is forced browsing?
Versus spidering?
Well, that's one of the options there. It says forced browse. I'm curious what that is. I haven't touched that one yet, actually.
Yeah. Yeah, that's you'll have to get back to us on that.
Okay.
You've got context here. So that's another place for context are respected is if you're doing scanning, if you're doing spidering as well, you can have contexts. And one thing I didn't show earlier, it's worth noting. Imagine one of these API routes was /admin, and we were told the admin part of the API, you will have access to it, but it's not in scope for testing. One thing I can do there is a exclude from context here. It also exclude from specific tools. It's exclude from proxy, don't proxy it. Don't scan it, don't spider it. But I can also do exclude from context here. And this looks just like the inclusion rules, but it's actually an exclusion rule to take it out of the context. If I were to hit OK on that now, you can see it's not in scope because the scope for this was being inherited from the context. Everything under this has been removed from the context and therefore, in this case, removed from the scope as well.
And in protected mode, obviously that means you can't do anything with it. You can browse it, the end.
Yep, it'll capture me browsing there, but that's it. It won't attack it. So that's worth noting. Trying to think. What was it you wanted me to cover?
Oh, we needed to cover the actual interception.
Oh yeah. That's good.
Interception.
So there's a little green circle up here that looks like the breakpoint icon in an IDE, like Eclipse, maybe. I'm not sure. Been a while since I've used it. Actually, the last time I used Eclipse, it wasn't Eclipse. It was Rational Team Concert with the RAD plugin, which
I was thinking WinDebug.
Yeah.
Or Ollie Debug, something like that. Yeah.
So okay. I
make a request.
Yeah.
In the browser.
In case you missed it, I clicked that and it turned from green to red. And I went over there and generated traffic immediately, and so it put itself back in the front. That's an option that can be turned off. It prompted me about it when I did this. I turned on the interception earlier before the webcast, and I didn't read it very carefully, so I can't turn it off. But it can be turned off. If I had the screen real estate to put this on a separate monitor, I wouldn't care because I would not have it in front of the browser I'm actually testing in. In this case, it's going to be a little bit in the way. But what has happened here is it started by issuing a pre-flight, the browser did. And rather than forwarding it onto the server, Zap has held on to it and given me the opportunity to interact with it before it is forwarded on. Now, if I use the one that's like a combination of a pause and play, it's the step forward button. It'll send that onto the server.
Now you have the response.
Now I have the response. Okay. It's not a very interesting response. That was a course pre-flight. This is a 204 no content response. It'll have the course policy in it. Okay.
Now, not to bring burp back into this, but this is definitely one of the features that Zap has that's way better than burps. Because sometimes whenever you're actually making you're pausing in an interception proxy like this, you want to see the results as they come back as well, and you have to make you have to select other options in order to do that in burp. This is an automatic thing, which is really nice.
Yeah, and so I can step through the traffic as it is going back and forth, and I have the opportunity to interact with both parts of it. I could actually modify the responses before they get to the browser as well, which is a weird thing to do most of the time because that suggests that I've taken on the scenario that I've compromised the server and I'm seeing if I can compromise the client from it. There are specific cases where that may be relevant to the threat model for the thing you're doing with, more likely in a mobile app. Yeah. So, or if the API itself was out of scope, but the client app was in scope, and I wanted to see if the client app was safely handling what was coming from the API.
Yeah.
For example, if they were run by different parties. So,
did you want to go over the HUD real quick? I think that's the only thing we really had left.
I will turn it on if you want to narrate.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Basically, what the HUD is, it's just a Zap heads-up display, right? And what that does is it basically enables a lot of the functionality of Zap in the browser. Of course, it's all run through JavaScript. And so as it does everything, you can actually click the different buttons in the browser to do a lot of the functionality that Zap actually has without having to go back and forth. And to be honest, it kind of gets in the way. It's a really, really great tool. I think that it would take some getting used to, especially for, some of us that have been doing this for forever, just going back and forth or having multiple screens or whatever, it's a really neat idea. I'll say that. We do. I mean, I know Mick recommends turning it off.
Yeah, I have a little trouble turning it back on at the moment. So,
yeah, that's weird.
Yeah,
but basically, we just kind of wanted to show you what it looks like more than anything. It has buttons along both the left and right hand sides of the page. Oh, excuse me, brother. Ooh, sorry, sneezing. It has buttons along both the right and left hand sides of the page that you can actually turn proxy on. You can turn the spider on, Ajax spider. You can turn targeting on. You can actually look at the different flags that pop up per page. Lots of different things like that.
Oh, yeah. Let's see if I can get a picture of it from the website. Nope. Wow. There are videos. Yeah, I don't know why it's not coming up.
Oh, I actually have it pulled up on mine real quick. If
do you want to take over presenting?
Switch over just real quick, I think.
Yeah. Okay. Do I need to do something?
I say that. It was. Oh yeah, there it goes. It just takes it a minute to actually pop up. There we go.
Do you need me to stop sharing before you can
start? I don't know. Hang on a second. I'll figure this out. Start sharing screen.
There we go.
Oh, good Lord.
I'm going to have Aaron show. What's wrong, Aaron?
Nothing. I just have 7,000 things open here that it wants to. Oh, not Chrome tab. I want a window. That's why.
Yeah. So,
apparently I have about no lie 3 or 4 dozen Chrome tabs open.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah. Okay. Can you guys see this?
It's probably smallish, but yeah. I think the relevant parts are.
Whoops.
Oh, that's yeah. Okay.
Let's get that resized real quick.
Okay.
There. Is that a little bit better?
Yeah.
Okay. So this is the HUD, right? And when we first pop it up, it's actually gonna let's just reset all the configurations to default. And then we can turn it on or off right here, right? There's a button right here that you can turn the HUD on and off. It'll show you the history down here. So as you click through, register, it takes it a minute, obviously. Log in. Log in. There we go. And it just pops up. Like I said, everything is in JavaScript. And so it actually shows you the different pieces of the web app that you've visited and everything. It will tell you if there's any site alerts, page alerts in particular. So the site alerts, of course, are for the site itself, the site as a whole, not just, hey, there's something in this particular page, right? There's info, low alerts, medium alerts, high alerts. You can turn attack mode on, which if you do that here, again, it's going to start automatically scanning. Active scanning, same thing, to a different, it's to a lower degree, basically. Attack mode is full on, hey, we're going to fuzz everything. We're going to do all the things.
I meant to show that. Do you want to do it, Aaron? Attack mode. I meant to show
sure.
that.
I'll do that here in just a second. Ajax spider, sites tree. And so you can turn on breakpoints right here. Turn on. Oh, well. So we can add the current domain to scope, right? Come on. Taking forever. Whatever. Okay. Let's just go attack mode. Turn on attack mode. Boom.
See if that one does it.
Path traversal.
Yeah. In the Zap window, what you'll see is there's actually scanning going on.
Yeah. If you can
so it's
all of this here.
It's opened an active scan pane in the bottom there, which is the same sort of pane if you actually just ran an active scan. But it's throwing attack traffic at the app, trying to find stuff.
So we're going to scroll up here. And as you can see right now, we're sitting at 1897 at the bottom. And this is just going to keep going until I tell it to stop. All right. Like it's throwing a ton of different fuzzing inputs, all sorts of different attack simulations at this particular system to see if it can find anything, right? Right here, for instance, this is going to be a cross-site scripting payload. Come on. Now it's just scrolling too fast.
Yeah. Yeah, it's driving.
Good Lord. Stop that. So anyway, I'm going to stop this now, right?
Okay. All right.
As soon as I can stop it. Stop.
Yeah.
Okay.
Get yourself out of attack mode. So yeah, obviously it's probably
attack mode is off now.
It's probably pretty apparent whether you're using attack mode, you're using the automated scanner, another way, just by kicking off an automated scan. A couple of things you need to make sure you've done right. One, make your scope. You want it to be set correctly, so it doesn't attack over scope things and upset people. The other thing is, it's not the sort of thing that you want to kick off and then go for a run or hop in the shower over lunchtime or something like that and end up like leaving your scanner running, because it's a lot of traffic. There is a risk that it causes production issues.
Right.
So
denial of service issues. I've actually seen years ago, I will say years ago, at a different company, we ran an intruder and it apparently filled up the database logs and shut down a database server by accident.
Yeah.
Now that was totally a misconfiguration on the client's end, but that's still our responsibility, right?
Yeah.
We took it down. So you got to be careful about stuff like that too.
Yeah. And you got to be on hand so that if you get a phone call that says, hey, we're seeing a problem here, you're in position to hit stop.
Bingo.
Like instantly. So yeah, I've seen not a consultant that works for Secure Ideas, but a consultant that works elsewhere, that we worked with at one point as we subbed for, where it was, this person was the principal on the job, kicked off the it was burp, it was the active scan, walked away. And when they couldn't get a hold of him, we got the call about the production issues it was causing. So
it's rare, but it does happen.
It's a risk, and it's a risk that's better mitigated by being near your desk.
Yeah.
So,
yep.
I mean, that goes for fuzzing as well. Not so much because you're likely to cause a production issue with volume of traffic with fuzzing. You can, especially if you're trying to, which normally you shouldn't be because denial of service isn't in scope for most engagements. But when you are doing it, you need to know the system. You need to understand the application you're working with. This kind of ties back to where I talked about earlier, mapping. So the first thing I did with Wayfair is I went through and I used every bit of functionality I could, as though I was a normal user. And that's what I wasn't doing there, because it's a target app and I'm familiar with it, is I would be inspecting the traffic as I go. I'd be trying to build an understanding of how it works and how it behaves. Because what you don't want to do is fuzz a field not knowing what it does and have it be the field that like deletes an account. And so you fuzz this thing and you get a whole bunch of 204 no content responses, and then the users table has been emptied out or something like that, because you didn't understand the app. So that's sort of an important part of it. We have used up, I didn't think we would run this long, but I think we should probably open up for questions.
Yep. I hate question slides, so I just said thanks for joining us. Is there any questions? Like, yeah, go ahead. Thanks, Edie.